Okay, so comic books and manga have been looked in like a debate for a while. If you mention one, or if you mention comic book sales, everyone will say, "Oh, manga's outselling, manga's outselling." I just want to look at the outline the industries and why is one doing a lot better than the other one. And in my personal belief, it's because manga's just had a stronger industry. It's forever had a stronger industry. Since the 1990s, they were selling 6 million copies of Shonen Jump each week, which is massive. While in the 90s you had like X-Men number 1 sold 7 million, which is more, but that was one comic, compared to 6 million each week on average for about 5 years possibly. I'm not certain on that. It just shows you how insane manga has always been. And they had their maturity in the 70s with Devilman. Like, Go Nagi, I believe, is the creator. He made all the comic books mature. Then you had Akira, which had an adaptation which brought it into the international and showed that anime can be mature. And because it's based off a manga, showed that manga can be mature. And you're not really seen as a kid for liking anime. Rarely. Or amongst the comic book or the nerdy sort of community. Amongst the average general pop. Depends on who, but it's becoming more mainstream. But like a while ago, you said you like anime. Well, it's more weird rather than being childish. Or sometimes, some of the anime. But yeah, that's just one big thing. The maturity started in the 70s. Got an adaptation as well with Akira. And you got tons of good adaptations around that era. Which just gave them a status of being mature. And showed that they, like the people actually respected the business side. Even JoJo's got an adaptation. Wasn't that big, but still, it was something. So that's one thing that manga has more. It has a respected industry. While in the 90s, you can definitely see there was a bit the stuff ups. This is really disappointing because in the 90s, comic books should have had a respected industry, but the guy who bought Marvel was like, "Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we bought Superman." Just, come on, man. Even back then, it was more. Here's another thing. It was Marvel and DC that have always owned it. While in manga, it's Shonen Jump that's the highest. But Shonen Jump has so many different genres. While Marvel and DC are the same genre, so you don't really have that competition. Especially since Marvel and DC are set in the same universe, a lot of their stuff. While Shonen Jump, it's different. All the different authors are competing, and it's very competitive in Shonen Jump. Like, if your book doesn't reach a certain amount of sales, you're off the book, so that's why a lot of Shonen Jump people work tons of hours, which isn't good, but it just shows competition, which is one of the reasons why they're pretty successful. And adaptation wise, I believe that anime appeals more to the target audience, or more to people more likely to read manga, while with comic books we had the MCU, which appeals to the general audience. It's kind of a difference. And then again, there is the perception of you can't get into Marvel or DC because there's nowhere to start, which just isn't true. Eh, I can go into that another day, but just not right now. That's one of the reasons why manga is just better. Adaptations are able to draw in new readers. Another thing that people forget is anime has more of a, with adaptations are, well, since the 90s have been going from kids, or they're for teenagers. So kids can watch it, but you can still watch as an adult and enjoy it, or it's still seen as adult media because there's violence in it. While with especially back then, the adaptations for comic books were no blood, or there might have been a few blood, a bit of blood. It was more kids' cartoons, which kind of ruined the perception. While back then, even Neon Genesis was airing in the 90s, so you could just say, "Oh, look, I'm smart for watching this. I'm not a dumb person who watches X-Men." That's another reason why manga's a lot stronger. And there's diversity, which is something a lot of people would say that is the reason why comic books aren't selling well. But it's like, I'm gonna use the French comics example. They have some of the most academic comic books of all time. Like, critically speaking, they have the best comics of all time. You can't deny it. If you read them and you look at the rich storytelling in it, you can see. But the problem is they've always appealed to the males, boys, or you got Tintin, which is more for the teenage boys. It's very much a boy sort of thing. Manga came in, gave girls a lot of different stories, romance. It didn't just focus on adventure boys, it's more different sort of stuff. Manga outsells French comics each week, even though a lot of manga creators will be influenced by French stuff, but they'll just come over there, sell more because they have the diversity, they appeal to more audiences. That's what increase the sales, and that's why manga's just dominating. So I also want to talk about Shonen Jump, how the characters in that aren't, like, a lot of people will say, oh, it's objectively better. I wouldn't say that. I'd say it's better at capturing more audiences. Like, the characters there are more relatable. They're not going through hard times. It's much more of an, like, Demon Slayer is a very easy watch. You can say there's gore and stuff, but you know, Tanjiro is a 2D character. He's just the guy. He's just like, oh, something something, and he never gives up. But a lot of people like that, and it appeals to tons of people. Animation looks good, appeals to people who like flashy stuff, and it brings in. That's what Shonen Jump's good at. A lot of their characters are very one-dimensional, and it just does well. And a lot of people don't want challenging stories sometimes, just want an easy watch, and that's what Shonen Jump's good at. But beneath all that, they still got Death Note is one of the greatest stories of all time. So you can't just say, oh look, they got bad stories. Well, that's not true. They got tons of good ones. It's just that more one-dimensional stories, they'll push harder and they'll grow the industry, get more people in, and that means more people will start reading all the others harder to get into stories. While with comic books, sure they're still good stories, but they're not mass appeal characters. Like like I say again, a lot of people don't think you can get into comic books because of all the different issues and all the different timelines, which loses it. And while it appeals to older fans who continue to read it, like, people want to start something new, want something new, and they want to know everything, which is a bit of a problem in my opinion, but that's just how it is. That's where manga can succeed. So yeah, that's just my general overview of why manga sells more, or why the differences between the industries between manga and comics. One thing I want to illustrate is that manga's been under a boost. It hasn't. That doesn't mean comic books have to be there. Like, comics are at a plateau, and there's lots of reasons why it's at a plateau. But it doesn't have to be compared to manga all the time. Like, for comic books to succeed, they gotta find their own, be inspired by manga, but just find their own way of getting more people in, trying to diversify. Just, we don't always have to say, oh, every time bring up manga when we're talking about comic books, because it just derails the enjoyment. Is It's not that good. Anyway, comment what you think below, and that's just my take.